पटनायक बोलेंगे, प्रोफेसर प्रभात पटनायक बोलेंगे, फिर शांता सिन्हा बोलेंगी और फिर आखिर में कन्हैया बोलेगा। प्रोफेसर पटनायक।
Friends, a lot has been said. I don't have very much to add to it, so I shall be very brief. At this moment, as you know, there is an intense struggle going on over the preservation of the secular foundations of the Indian polity. Now, the fact that the Indian polity emerged with a secular, democratic foundations is itself a product of the anti-colonial struggle. Consequently, it is very important in this struggle which is going on for those who are attacking the secular foundations of the Indian polity to also attack the nature of the anti-colonial struggle that we had, to interpret it differently and to destroy such interpretation of that struggle which exists. Professor Bipan Chandra's book is one of the most influential, one of the most outstanding scientific studies of the anti-colonial struggle that we have. Now, since the anti-colonial struggle brought us to an India which was marked by a secular democratic republic based on universal adult franchise, I actually view that as a revolutionary struggle, because in a country characterized by millennia of caste system and institutionalized inequality, to emerge into a modernity when you have a secular democratic polity based on adult franchise is an enormous leap. It's a leap which is what I would call India's long revolution. Now, if this long revolution is going to be put back, the counter-revolution is what we are seeing today. Now, any revolution or any counter-revolution requires an intellectual basis to it. Books like Bipan Chandra's book, books which are written by serious historians, provide the intellectual basis for understanding India's long revolution. Now, obviously, when an effort is made to counter it, an effort is made to unleash a counter-revolution, it is natural that you would expect an intellectual counter-revolution as well. The tragedy of our country is that this intellectual counter-revolution does not take the form of producing new books, does not take the form of producing a new interpretation, does not take the form of producing some new kind of scholarship, but it takes the form of destroying that which exists. There are many right-wing, well-known historians, Neil Ferguson, all kinds of people. I wish that the counter-revolutionaries in India could produce a historian like that. Then at least there would be an intellectual challenge. But nothing of that kind. Burn books, exactly what's going on in JNU or in University of Hyderabad, etc. You are not thinking in terms of setting up a new institution, an institution that may be of a different kind compared to JNU, an institution maybe which is in quotes nationalist, but you're actually destroying an outstanding institution. So the tragedy of our country is that the counter-revolutionaries lack any intellectual basis, that they have no way of actually countering the kind of intellectual work that people like Bipan Chandra had made in order to make us understanding our own history and to make us understand how this long revolution in India actually took place. Now, in any society which is making a revolutionary transition, revolutionary terrorism is a necessary stage. Revolutionary terrorism everywhere has been a necessary stage in the transition to revolutionary socialism. In fact, Ajay Patnaik referred to it. In Russia, for instance, you actually had the Narodniki, you had the socialist revolutionaries, all of whom, to start with, believed in terrorism. Revolutionary terrorism. Lenin's own brother Alexander Ulyanov was a revolutionary terrorist. But from revolutionary terrorism, there's a transition which takes place to revolutionary socialism. Sometimes the same people make the transition, like Bhagat Singh. Sometimes a new generation comes along that learns the lessons of the earlier period and then moves towards revolutionary terrorism. Not many would know that much of the left in Bengal emerged out of the revolutionary terrorist movement. In fact, a lot of the revolutionary terrorists then actually became the socialist revolutionaries in Bengal at a later point. So, revolutionary terrorism is a necessary stage in the evolution of revolutionary socialism. This is exactly something which happened in Bhagat Singh's own life, and as Aditya said, Professor Bipan Chandra even said that he would substitute the word revolutionary terrorism, which, if you like, might have characterized an earlier period in the evolution of a person and a movement, by the word revolutionary socialism, which is what Bhagat Singh actually ultimately came to. At the time of his execution, he was actually a revolutionary socialist reading Lenin. But it is not that these substitutions would please anybody. They are not interested in the veracity of ideas. They are not interested in debates. They are not interested in evidence. They are not interested in discussing how a particular movement might have emerged. They are basically interested in destroying that which exists, that intellectual effort of Bipan Chandra and his colleagues which exists, and no matter how many changes that Bipan Chandra and his colleagues might have wished to make to that book, they would have wished to ban that book anyway. That's exactly what had happened under the earlier NDA regime, and we are seeing a rehearsal of exactly the same thing which is taking place now. But what we must remember is that this is part of the struggle to change the foundations of the Indian polity from a secular democratic one to a Hindu Rashtra authoritarian one. In fact, you can see this in very many spheres. You look at the changes taking place in BJP ruled states as far as franchise is concerned, as far as voting is concerned, in Rajasthan and so on. Now, you cannot even contest elections unless you have a certain amount of minimum qualifications, which is reminiscent of the colonial times. So basically, an effort is being made to change the democratic structure of the society, to change the secular structure of the society, and in that effort, intellectual work is essential to prevent it. And of course, I'm so glad that in this intellectual struggle against that effort, my university is standing in the front rank. Thank you.